My partner of 3 years secretly stole the $2,800 I had been saving for our future apartment and used it to take another woman on a luxury vacation, then dismissed my pain by saying I'd get over it. But now he's leaving desperate, frantic voicemails as his life begins to unravel. My partner took my savings to fund a holiday with another woman. When I confronted him, he simply dismissed my concerns, declaring, "You'll eventually move past it." His companions ridiculed me, while she labeled me pathetic. Yet, just days later, he was leaving frantic, desperate voicemails. Felix and I had been a couple for just over 3 years. Although we weren't officially living together, he spent most nights at my apartment, given his own was a 40-minute journey from his job, whereas mine was only 15. We had even discussed truly cohabiting next year, once my lease ended. Or so I thought. Financially, we were both quite ordinary. We typically divided most costs when we socialized, alternated covering grocery bills, and maintained what I believed was an equitable financial understanding. For the past 18 months, I had been accumulating funds for a security deposit and initial month's rent on a more suitable residence for our shared future. It wasn't a vast sum, approximately $2,800, but it symbolized numerous small concessions, preparing meals instead of purchasing them, forgoing coffee shop treats, and picking up additional weekend shifts whenever possible. Last Friday, I intended to transfer some money from my savings into my checking account to cover my upcoming car insurance premium. Upon opening my banking application, I almost dropped my device. My savings balance stood at only $267, rather than the expected $2,800 plus. My immediate thought was either an error had occurred or my account had been compromised. I frantically telephoned the bank, and following a series of security inquiries, the representative reviewed my recent activity. A withdrawal of $2,550 had been made 3 days prior, a transaction I definitely had not authorized. The representative inquired if anyone else had access to my funds, and at that moment, a sinking feeling enveloped me. Felix knew my phone's password. I had never concealed it from him. We always maintained an open device policy. He had observed me inputting my banking app password previously. I never imagined he would exploit that trust. I thanked the bank representative and ended the call, then examined the application's security log. The withdrawal had been performed personally at a different branch, utilizing my identification. However, I hadn't visited that specific branch in months. Felix must have removed my driver's license from my wallet while I was bathing or asleep. I attempted to reach Felix by phone, but my call went directly to his voicemail. I messaged him, inquiring about his whereabouts and suggesting we speak. He responded several hours later, stating he was out with male friends and would return the following day. Something about the entire situation felt unsettling. I spent the night restlessly, attempting to conceive any explanation beyond the evident truth. Perhaps an undisclosed emergency had arisen. Perhaps he was orchestrating an elaborate surprise. Deep down, I understood I was clinging to false hope. The next morning, I checked his Instagram, a platform I seldom visit as he rarely updates it. There were no new posts on his profile, but upon viewing his friend Andy's stories, my reality shattered. There he was, Felix on a beach, his arm encircling a young woman I had never encountered. The caption declared, "Day 2 of vacation vibes with these lovebirds." Lovebirds, plural. I browsed further through Andy's stories, discovering additional images of Felix and this woman, identified as Jasmine via the tags. They were at a resort in Cancun, an establishment that would have likely cost around $2,500 for a pair. I was nauseated. 3 years together, and he had misappropriated my funds to take another woman on a holiday. I remained on my bathroom floor for what seemed like an eternity, oscillating between floods of tears and profound numbness. When Felix finally returned home Sunday evening, I was waiting. He entered as if nothing was amiss, bronzed and grinning, dropping his travel bag by the entrance. He offered a casual greeting and attempted to kiss me, but I recoiled, challenging him about his true whereabouts. Initially, he attempted to maintain his narrative of socializing with male companions, but upon seeing Andy's Instagram stories, his entire disposition shifted. Not to embarrassment or regret, but merely vexation, as though I had exposed a trivial untruth, like consuming the last biscuit, rather than an utter betrayal of our bond. He didn't even contest appropriating the funds. He asserted it was an impromptu trip, and Jasmine had won tickets, but required a companion. He stated he intended to reimburse me eventually, as though that rendered his actions acceptable. When I highlighted that he frequently struggled to contribute his half for groceries, he became defensive. What truly astonished me was his attempt to minimize the theft, suggesting it wasn't as if he had taken my rent money. It was simply sitting there. I reminded him it represented our prospective apartment funds, diligently saved for over a year. He then had the nerve to chuckle, stating we wouldn't secure anything worthwhile for merely $2,800 regardless. When I inquired if Jasmine was his girlfriend, he paused just long enough for me to discern the reality before he denied it. He maintained she was merely a companion, yet it's widely understood that friends do not embark on intimate beach holidays together. Throughout our entire discussion, he remained utterly dismissive, retrieving a beverage from the refrigerator, informing me he wished to avoid an argument, and behaving as if I were exaggerating trivialities. When I accused him of both theft and infidelity, he stared directly at me and coolly stated, "Calm down. You'll move past this." It was then I understood this wasn't an error or a singular lapse in judgment. This revealed his true character, a person capable of stealing from me, being unfaithful, and subsequently telling me to simply recover, as if my reaction were excessive. I instructed him to vacate my apartment. He attempted to protest, citing his distant residence and his morning work commitments. I retorted that those were his issues, and he ought to have considered them prior to absconding with my money and deceiving me. As he departed, he dared to murmur that I was being unreasonable and exaggerating. His final insult was to tell me to keep the dramatics because Jasmine wouldn't behave in such a manner. Once he was gone, I collapsed onto the sofa, trembling. I've spent the past 2 days in a daze, attempting to comprehend everything. I blocked him after receiving numerous messages accusing me of overreacting and insisting I calm down so we can talk like adults. I reported myself ill from work yesterday and today and have barely consumed any food. I repeatedly check my bank balance, foolishly hoping the money will miraculously rematerialize, even though I know it's futile. I'm unsure how to proceed. A part of me considers reporting the larceny to the authorities, but we were a couple for 3 years. Despite everything, the prospect of his arrest makes me feel ill. Then I recall his expression when he told me to get over it, and a different sort of nausea washes over me. I contacted the bank once more this morning, but given his access to my identification and knowledge of my passwords, they classified it as unauthorized use rather than outright fraud. They advised my best course of action would be to pursue it as a civil dispute. I am in the process of updating all my passwords, establishing a new bank account, and arranging for my locks to be rekeyed tomorrow. While I doubt he would attempt to return, I no longer recognize the individual he has become, so I cannot be certain. I'm not even sure what kind of assistance I'm seeking here. I simply needed to articulate this somewhere, as I feel completely overwhelmed. First update. Firstly, I wish to express my gratitude to everyone who commented on my previous submission. I honestly hadn't anticipated such a large number of responses, and perusing your remarks truly made me feel less isolated and irrational. Many requested a further account, and indeed, a week has passed since I expelled Felix from my residence, following the revelation that he had appropriated my savings to accompany Jasmine to Cancun. The initial few days were a haze of tears, minimal sustenance, and ceaseless phone checks. Despite having blocked him, I persistently believed he might discover a means to reach out, claiming it was all a significant misunderstanding. I returned to my job on Wednesday, unable to sacrifice additional workdays. My colleague observed my unusual demeanor and inquired about my well-being during our lunch break. I offered her the abbreviated narrative, and she reacted with fitting shock. Witnessing someone else's horrified response felt genuinely validating. That evening, I received a message from an unregistered number. It was Felix, communicating via his friend Morris's device, with a terse, "We need to talk." I chose not to reply. An hour later, another message arrived. "You're being immature. It's merely money." I stated I'd reimburse you. I then proceeded to block Morris's number as well. Thursday passed without incident, but Friday marked a significant decline. My friend Carla urged me to join her for beverages, stressing my need to leave my apartment. I was hesitant yet consented, acknowledging her point. I had been oscillating between work and retreating beneath my covers to watch short videos. We visited a downtown establishment known for its Friday trivia. I was, in fact, beginning to feel somewhat normal for the first time all week, chuckling at Carla's atrocious guesses during the music segment. Then, I excused myself to the restroom, and upon my return, I halted. Felix was present, accompanied by Andy, Maurice, and 3 other individuals from his circle. They occupied a table across the venue and had not yet noticed me. I instantly informed Carla we had to depart, but as I collected my jacket, Andy observed me and approached. Andy approached with a self-satisfied grin, making audible remarks about my supposed distress over a small sum of money and how Felix had supposedly been despondent all week due to my excessive reaction. In his view, Felix hadn't squandered my funds on illicit substances. It was merely a holiday with an attractive woman, and any man would have acted identically. I attempted to assert myself, reminding him that Felix had committed theft against me, but Andy simply executed a theatrical eye roll. By this time, Felix had noticed the disturbance and was making his way over with Maurice and the others, effectively obstructing our egress. Felix behaved with such nonchalance, as though we had merely encountered each other casually at a supermarket. He repeatedly urged me to unblock him so we could resolve the situation. When I firmly declared there was nothing to resolve, he had both stolen from me and been unfaithful, Maurice and the other male began to snicker. Felix's rationale was pitiful. He conceded that taking the money without prior permission was improper, but asserted it wasn't actual theft because we're a couple and what's yours is mine. He maintained Jasmine was simply a platonic acquaintance and that it wasn't an intimate holiday, as Andy and Maurice were also present. It was a collective excursion. When I highlighted that Andy's Instagram explicitly referred to them as lovebirds, Andy muttered something about it being merely a jest. At that moment, a female voice from behind me spoke, and my sense of shame intensified dramatically. It was Jasmine, inquiring if I was the one having a meltdown over a few dollars. When I attempted to clarify that he had misappropriated my savings, she scrutinized me with a condescending gaze, then declared me pathetic for being so distraught over $2,000. I corrected her, stating the actual sum was $2,550, and it had taken me over a year to accumulate. Her reaction? She tossed her head back and guffawed, remarking that was even sadder. I glanced at Felix, anticipating him to defend me or instruct her to desist. Instead, he was fixated on the floor, a faint smile playing at the edges of his lips. It suddenly dawned on me. He had recounted all of this to them. They had been finding humor in it, in me, the woman foolish enough to have her money taken, pitiful enough to be upset by it. Carla, bless her heart, declared our departure and maneuvered past Maurice. As we walked away, I overheard further laughter from behind us, and Jasmine ensured I caught her remarking to Felix that he had dodged a bullet by avoiding a relationship with someone so financially precarious. I reached the exterior before the tears began. Carla embraced me as I attempted to compose myself, then arranged for a ride-sharing service to transport us back to my residence. During the journey, she confided that Felix and his companions had always been unpleasant, and she had never comprehended my attraction to him. Back in my apartment, Carla remained overnight. We ordered a pizza, uncorked a bottle of wine, and she allowed me to express my frustrations. I showed her the messages Felix had sent from Maurice's phone, and she assisted me in blocking several additional numbers I hadn't considered. The following morning, I awoke to an Instagram direct message from Jasmine. I nearly refrained from opening it, but my inquisitiveness prevailed. The communication corroborated my deepest anxieties. She and Felix had been romantically involved for several months. He had led her to believe our relationship was essentially over, and we were merely cohabiting. She asserted that learning he had taken my money was repulsive, but wished for me to know the complete truth, emphasizing that their affair hadn't begun with a Cancun trip. I captured a screenshot, then blocked her as well. Months. All those late nights spent working, the weekends he was purportedly assisting his friend with moving, the enigmatic phone calls he would take outdoors. It all became clear now. I showed Carla the message once she awoke. She exhibited no astonishment, observing that individuals like Felix don't abruptly choose to commit theft and infidelity. They gradually escalate to it. We dedicated Saturday to formulating a strategy. Firstly, I telephoned my landlord, elaborating on the circumstances and inquiring about changing the locks, as Felix was not listed on the lease agreement. They consented to dispatching someone Monday morning. Subsequently, I visited my financial institution and established an entirely new account at a separate bank, transferring the meager funds I had remaining. I updated all my passwords and implemented two-factor authentication across every platform. Carla assisted me in sifting through my apartment, collecting Felix's abandoned belongings into a container. It wasn't a substantial amount. Some clothing, a toothbrush, a few video games. Nothing warranting a dispute. Sunday morning, I awoke with a changed sensation, not necessarily improved, but certainly clearer. The shame from Friday evening still rankled, but beneath it lay a different emotion. Anger. Not the immediate, fiery reaction from the initial discovery, but a colder, more concentrated fury. They considered me pathetic. Very well, let them. But I wasn't about to retreat and vanish. I devoted Sunday to thoroughly cleaning my apartment, discarding items that evoked memories of Felix and reconfiguring furniture. It may sound trivial, but it felt like reasserting ownership of my environment. I also devised a budget to replenish my savings. It would require effort, but I had accomplished it previously. This morning, the locksmith arrived and altered my locks. A burden lifted from my shoulders, knowing Felix could no longer simply enter uninvited. I attended work, and upon checking my phone during my lunch break, I discovered 3 missed calls from Felix, not from an unfamiliar number, but his genuine one. I must have overlooked blocking it amidst the others. I listened to the voicemail he had left. His demeanor had drastically shifted since Friday evening. He sounded anxious, almost frantic, asserting we needed to speak because Jasmine was uttering some insane claims that weren't true, or at least, not entirely. He concluded with, "I miss you." I erased it without returning the call. When I arrived home from work, a modest envelope had been slid beneath my door. Inside lay $300 in currency and a message, starting to reimburse you. Can we please converse? F. $300 out of $2,550, and he believed that would rectify the situation. I'm uncertain of his current strategy. Perhaps Jasmine ended their involvement after discovering he was a thief. Perhaps his friends grew weary of the commotion, leaving him with no one to socialize with. Perhaps he finally grasped that residing 40 minutes from work is genuinely inconvenient. Whatever his motivation, I refused to participate. The Felix the first thought I knew never truly existed. The actual Felix absconded with my funds, deceived me for months, permitted his companions to ridicule me, and stood idly by as his other girlfriend branded me pathetic. Carla is visiting again this evening to assist me in composing a message, unequivocally stating our relationship is over and he must cease all contact. She also recommended meticulous documentation, should I need to seek a restraining order. That feels drastic, but after the events of the past week, I wouldn't underestimate his potential actions. I will provide another account if anything noteworthy transpires. Second update, my sincerest thanks to everyone for the immense encouragement on my prior submissions. Perusing your remarks has offered both solace and insight. Many of you requested a further account, so here it is. Nearly 2 weeks have elapsed since the bar encounter where Felix, Jasmine, and their associates publicly shamed me. Since then, Felix has intensified his efforts to reach me. The $300 he discreetly placed under my door was merely the commencement. He has appeared at my place of employment on 2 occasions, a deeply mortifying situation requiring me to inform my supervisor. He dispatched flowers accompanied by apologies and even had his mother telephone me, a call I did not accept. Last Thursday morning, I discovered my vehicle with a deflated tire. Initially, I dismissed it as misfortune until I observed a small, seemingly intentional puncture. While I cannot definitively prove Felix's involvement, the timing certainly raises suspicion. Already behind schedule, I was compelled to summon a rideshare service for work, postponing the tire repair, another unforeseen expenditure I could ill afford. That incident proved to be the absolute breaking point. After work, I proceeded directly to Carla's home instead of my own. I feared Felix might be loitering at my apartment, and I desperately needed mental clarity. Carla prepared us a meal, and we settled down to devise a proper strategy, not merely blocking him and hoping he would disappear, but a thorough blueprint to permanently remove him from my existence. You must approach this like a game of chess, Carla advised. He's executed his moves. Now it's your turn. I've never excelled at chess, yet I comprehended her message. Until this moment, I had simply been reacting to Felix, altering my locks after his attempts to enter, blocking numbers following his outreach. I needed to shift from being reactive to proactive. We compiled a comprehensive list of tasks, completely vacating my residence while Felix was at work, achieving financial separation, meticulously documenting all events, contacting his relatives, informing shared acquaintances, and bracing for any potential escalation. The following morning, I reported myself ill from my job. While I felt a pang of guilt, I required an entire day to initiate my strategy. First, I telephoned my landlord, explaining the circumstances with greater specificity. To my astonishment, she exhibited immense empathy, consenting to release me from my lease with merely 30 days' notice, rather than the customary 60. Subsequently, I visited my financial institution and conferred with a manager regarding my accounts. I had already established a new account with a distinct bank, but I wished to ensure no residual links remained. Additionally, I reviewed my credit report to verify Felix had not initiated any accounts using my identity. Fortunately, he hadn't proceeded to that extent. I dedicated the afternoon to meticulously itemizing every belonging in my apartment, capturing photographs of my possessions. I categorized items, those unequivocally mine from before Felix, articles we acquired jointly, and things clearly belonging to him. For our shared purchases, I noted who had provided payment. That evening, I commenced packing my crucial items, vital documents, cherished possessions, and sufficient attire for a week. Carla assisted me in transporting these to her home for interim safekeeping. The subsequent major undertaking involved reaching out to Felix's family. This was the aspect I most apprehended. Felix maintained a close relationship with his parents, particularly his mother, who had always been kind to me. I composed and revised a message to her, striving to strike the appropriate equilibrium between providing information and making accusations. Ultimately, I kept it straightforward and factual. I detailed that Felix had extracted funds from my account without authorization, utilized them for a holiday with another woman, and that upon confrontation, he had been unconcerned and unkind. I attached screenshots of my bank statement displaying the withdrawal, Andy's Instagram posts from Cancun, and Jasmine's message verifying their months-long association. Her reply arrived the following morning. Lena, I am appalled and disheartened by this news. I raised Felix to be a better person. I am truly sorry for your ordeal. I will address this with him. A significant burden lifted from my spirit. She had believed me. I hadn't recognized the profound need for that affirmation until it was received. The subsequent phase of my plan proved more intricate, engaging with shared acquaintances. Felix and I belonged to several overlapping social circles, and I understood the necessity of preempting any version of events he might disseminate. I opted to begin with our most genuinely mutual friend, August. He had known Felix longer than I, yet always possessed a balanced perspective. I proposed we meet for coffee, and he readily assented. At the coffee shop, I provided him with the abbreviated account of occurrences, presenting the identical evidence I had dispatched to Felix's mother. His response took me by surprise. I knew something wasn't right, he stated. Felix has been behaving unusually for months, contriving excuses to avoid our usual crowd, and just last week, he was soliciting funds for rent. This was news to me. Rent? He had never before encountered difficulty meeting rent obligations. August mentioned something about unforeseen expenditures, and certainly, a trip to Cancun would fit that description. Before our departure, August pledged to clarify the situation with our other friends. Not everyone will accept it, he cautioned. Andy and Maurice are too deeply entangled with Felix to perceive the truth, but most individuals will comprehend. Throughout the subsequent days, I persisted in implementing my strategy. I secured a modest studio apartment on the other side of town, one I could manage financially by myself. The property owner consented to a 6-month tenancy, allowing me to relocate the subsequent week. I also reached out to my mobile service provider and altered my telephone number. I distributed the new contact solely to individuals I fully trusted: Carla, my family, a select few intimate friends, and my manager at work. The most challenging aspect was returning to my former apartment to pack the remaining belongings. I selected a Tuesday, knowing Felix would be undertaking a double shift at the warehouse. Carla and August arrived to assist, bringing August's pickup vehicle. We were nearing completion when my device vibrated with a message from an unrecognized number. Heads up, Felix departed work prematurely, claiming to feel unwell. It was from Danny, a colleague of Felix's whom I had met at a company picnic the previous summer. I hadn't even considered alerting him to the circumstances, but apparently, August had already contacted him. My heart began to pound. We still had at least another hour of packing, and Felix could arrive at any moment. We toiled in anxious quiet, hastily tossing items into boxes, without much method. We had just finished loading the final container when Felix's automobile entered the parking area. August swiftly entered his truck, and Carla and I leapt into my car. As we exited the parking spot, Felix noticed us. The expression on his face as he comprehended the unfolding events, first bewilderment, then shock, then fury, is an image I will forever retain. The remainder of the day was a hazy period of relocating containers, constructing furniture, and startling at every phone notification. Felix had, somehow, acquired my new number and was dispatching a barrage of messages, oscillating between contrition, fury, and supplication. I chose not to reply to any of them. Instead, I captured screenshots and deposited them into my expanding dossier of evidence. That night, sleeping in my new dwelling, I experienced an unfamiliar tranquility. The apartment was utterly Spartan. Merely a mattress on the floor, boxes strewn everywhere, and the refrigerator vacant save for pizza carton and some beer August had provided. No recollections of Felix, no apprehension about his uninvited appearance. The following morning, I awoke to a voicemail from Felix's mother. Her voice conveyed weariness and sorrow. "Lena, I spoke with Felix. He confessed everything. I don't know what to express, except I am profoundly sorry. He was not brought up to behave this way. If you require anything, please inform me." It has been 3 days since the relocation. Felix's efforts to reach me have diminished in frequency, but increased in desperation. Yesterday, he sent an email stating Jasmine had terminated their relationship after learning the complete narrative and that he had grasped the gravity of his error. I did not reply. I continue to reside with Carla on most evenings, only visiting my new residence to retrieve clothing or other essentials. I am not yet completely settled, partly due to ongoing organization, but predominantly because I fear Felix might somehow ascertain my new address. The entire circumstance is draining, frightening, and heartbreaking. Latest update. Hello everyone. Approximately 3 weeks have elapsed since my last report, and much has transpired. Firstly, my sincere appreciation for all your guidance and encouragement. Perusing your observations has strengthened my resolve during moments I was tempted to reply to Felix. Several individuals recommended installing a security camera for my new dwelling. I heeded that counsel and procured an affordable doorbell camera from an online retailer. Following my relocation and outreach to Felix's family and acquaintances, a complete silence emanated from him for around 4 days. Initially, I felt a sense of relief, assuming he had finally understood and was progressing. I ought to have known better. The quiet broke last Monday morning. As I prepared for work, my device vibrated with a message from yet another unfamiliar number. I know you're seeing these. You can't discard 3 years. We need to converse. I blocked the number without a response. By lunchtime, he had discovered an alternative method to reach me, this time via a fabricated Instagram profile. The message was more extensive but conveyed essentially the same sentiments. I was overreacting. He had made an error. We could overcome this. What particularly resonated was the continued absence of any genuine admission of his actions. No, I'm sorry I stole from you, or I'm sorry I deceived you for months. Just, I made a mistake, as if he had merely neglected a chore like taking out the refuse. That evening, August messaged, inquiring if I wished to share a meal. He had consistently maintained contact since assisting with my relocation. Over our Thai dinner, August updated me on the circulating rumors. It seemed Felix's life was beginning to disintegrate. Jasmine had entirely severed ties after learning the complete narrative from various individuals. She had been led to believe that Felix and I were essentially cohabitants who occasionally engaged intimately, rather than a devoted couple of 3 years. Felix's parents had ceased their financial support. I had been unaware of their assistance with his expenses, but apparently, they had been covering his automobile insurance and mobile service. Andy and Maurice continued to associate with Felix, but the majority of our other friends had distanced themselves. Most notably, Felix was encountering difficulties with his rent. His apartment had always been costlier than mine, and without my residence as a temporary crash pad nearer to his job, he was incurring higher fuel costs. Furthermore, he had depleted his accumulated funds on the Cancun excursion. The following morning, an email from Felix's mother appeared. She proposed we meet for coffee to retrieve some of my belongings that had been stored at their residence. Upon my arrival, she was already present, appearing weary with pronounced shadows beneath her eyes. She expressed regret for Felix's conduct and informed me he had temporarily returned home, unable to cover his rent. He was coping poorly, displaying anger towards everyone, and failing to comprehend that these were the inherent repercussions of his choices. Before we went our separate ways, she embraced me and conveyed that I merited more kindness from him. I wept in my car afterward, not for Felix, but for the connection I had believed we shared, for the future we had envisioned, and for the individual I had imagined him to be. The subsequent days passed with relative calm. I established a routine in my new abode and recommenced accumulating my savings. For short intervals, the entire Felix saga would recede from my thoughts. Then, Friday arrived. I was at the grocery store when I noticed Maurice observing me from the extremity of an aisle. My heart sank. If Maurice was present, was Felix nearby as well? I made my way towards the exit and almost collided with Andy in the parking facility. Unexpectedly, Andy offered an apology for his conduct at the bar that evening. He confessed Felix had informed them our relationship was deteriorating and that the funds were partially his regardless. When I inquired about this shift in perspective, Andy disclosed that Felix had been acting erratically, constantly irritable, borrowing money without reimbursement, even becoming inebriated and perforating Maurice's bathroom wall. Most alarmingly, Felix continued to speak of me as though I would return at any moment. Upon my return home, a parcel rested against my entrance, addressed in Felix's distinct script. Within, $500 in currency accompanied a disjointed letter, oscillating between expressions of remorse, justifications, and pleas for reconciliation. He cited selling his gaming console to commence repayment and having attended 2 therapy sessions. Later that evening, my telephone rang from an unidentified number. Against my better sense, I answered. It was Felix, his words slurred. He inquired if I had received his delivery and mentioned taking on a delivery service job to reimburse me. When I affirmed receipt, his demeanor turned despondent. He spoke incoherently about his life crumbling, his parents treating him like a minor, Jasmine refusing communication, and friends perceiving him negatively. He insisted that individuals err and that I couldn't discard 3 years over a single misstep. I clarified that it wasn't one error, but a progression of conscious decisions. He started weeping, pleading for another opportunity. I simply uttered goodbye and terminated the call, immediately blocking the number. Within moments, my device was vibrating with messages from various unregistered numbers. The initial few contained tearful entreaties, but subsequent ones became increasingly irate, almost alarming. The ultimate voicemail, left at 2:37 a.m., comprised only Felix's incoherent shouts, interspersed with expressions such as ruined my life and never loved me, before degenerating into unintelligible clamor. I preserved all the voicemails and forwarded them to Carla and August. The following morning, I received a message from Felix's mother, expressing regret for his actions. She stated they had confiscated his vehicle keys and were exploring more rigorous assistance for him. 2 days have passed since those voicemails. Felix has not attempted to reach me again, but I remain unsettled. I have returned to staying with Carla, purely for security. I am uncertain what the future holds, but regardless, I will not return to him. Not after everything that has occurred, and certainly not after hearing that final voicemail.